Okay, so let's tackle this huge question. How did life even begin on Earth? It's a real head-scratcher, right?
Yeah.
This puzzle has been around forever, and today we'll dive into some seriously fascinating ideas about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting is that we're starting our journey in a place you might not expect, Greenland. When you think about life emerging, you picture something warm and tropical, right? Like a primordial soup kind of thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Not exactly a land of ice and snow.
Right, exactly. But here's the thing, Greenland's got these incredible secrets hidden in its ancient rocks, secrets that really challenge those assumptions about where life might have first appeared.
So, okay, what's the story with Greenland then?
All right.
Why is it so important to figuring out life's origins?
Well, picture this. Billions of years ago, long before the Vikings even thought about going there, Greenland was a totally different place. Geologists have been studying these rocks there, especially this type called gneiss. And you know what they discovered? It's amazing. Evidence of liquid oceans existing way back then, like around 3.7 billion years ago.
Whoa, 3.7 billion years.
Yeah.
That's almost as old as the Earth itself.
I know, right? It's incredible. And this discovery really shook things up because it meant that the early Earth wasn't just this hot, molten, uninhabitable place. There was liquid water, which is, a key ingredient for life as we know it.
So Greenland's starting to change the whole picture of what the early Earth was really like.
Totally. And then there was another really cool discovery in this region called Izua. Researchers found these unique rock formations called pillow lavas and serpentine rocks. These form, you see, when mud volcanoes erupt under the sea. And get this, these rocks were also dated to around 3.7 billion years ago.
Okay, so we're getting more evidence for liquid water on the early Earth.
Got it.
But mud volcanoes. I mean, even with water, that doesn't sound like the most hospitable place to start life.
You know what? You're right. It might not sound like paradise to us, but these mud volcanoes could have been crucial for jumpstarting life. They spew out this warm, alkaline water that's full of all sorts of chemicals, a potential breeding ground for those very first life forms.
Okay, I'm starting to get why Greenland's so important in this whole puzzle. But how do we even go from rocks and water to actual living things? Like, what's the missing link?
That's where things get really interesting. We need to talk about how those basic building blocks of life could have come together and actually formed something that could, live. Scientists call this process a biogenesis, and one of the main ideas out there is the Operin-Haldane hypothesis. Ever heard of it?
The Operin-Haldane what now? Break that down for me.
Basically, it's a framework for understanding how life could have come from non-living matter through a whole series of chemical reactions. Imagine the early Earth's atmosphere. Okay, it's this mix of gases like methane, ammonia, water vapor. Now throw in some energy sources like lightning strikes or ultraviolet radiation from the sun.
I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
It's like that famous Miller-Urey experiment. They tried to recreate those primordial conditions in the lab and ended up making amino acids. I remember learning about that. It felt like such a huge step towards understanding where life came from.
Yeah, it was a landmark experiment for sure. But there's a catch. Creating those amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, that was incredible. But life isn't just a random bunch of building blocks, right?
No, it needs organization. A system. It's like having all the cake ingredients but not knowing how to bake it.
Yeah.
You need the recipe, the right steps, the perfect conditions.
Exactly. Life needs a way to organize those ingredients, create complexity, and most importantly, replicate itself. That's where the idea of self-replication becomes super important in understanding how life even got started.
Yeah, self-replication, that ability to make copies of itself, is like the defining thing about life. But how did that very first self-replicating molecule even come about? Now, that's a real mystery.
It is. It's a big one. For a long time, the focus was on DNA, the molecule that carries our genetic information.
Yes.
But DNA is complex. It needs a whole bunch of enzymes to replicate. So which came first? The DNA or the enzymes that copy it?
That's like a chicken and egg thing, right?
Totally. And that's why scientists started looking at another molecule, RNA.
RNA. How's that different?
RNA is kind of like DNA's simpler cousin. It's single-stranded instead of double-stranded. But the crucial part is RNA can act as both a carrier of genetic information, like DNA, and as an enzyme, something that speeds up chemical reactions. Those special catalytic RNAs are called ribozymes.
Hold on, so RNA can do both jobs, carry genetic information and speed up reactions.
You got it. That's exactly what led to the RNA world hypothesis. The idea is that RNA, not DNA, was the key player in the very early stages of life. It could have been the first self-replicator holding genetic information and making copies of itself.
Wow, that's a pretty elegant solution to that chicken and egg problem.
Hmm?
But are there any problems with this RNA world idea?
There are some big ones, actually. One of the biggest challenges is that even with all our scientific advances, creating a ribozyme in the lab that can actually self-replicate has been super difficult.
So even if we say RNA could have been the first self-replicator, the question is how did that first self-replicating RNA even form?
That's the million-dollar question. And the numbers make it even more challenging. Making RNA from scratch under those early Earth conditions is incredibly complex. Remember, RNA is made up of ribose, a phosphate group, and those RNA bases. Making those separate parts in the lab has been done, but getting them to assemble correctly into a real working RNA molecule under plausible early Earth conditions, that's a whole other level of difficulty.
So even if those building blocks were just floating around, the odds of them randomly coming together in the right way to make a self-replicating RNA molecule seem, well, astronomical.
That's where the math gets really interesting. Let's just look at making one RNA base one of those crucial building blocks. A chemist named Graham Cairns Smith estimated that this process, starting from basic chemicals that were probably on the early Earth, would need at least 140 very specific steps. And at each step, there are tons of possible reactions that could happen, most of them leading to the wrong product.
It's like trying to find your way through a maze in total darkness. One wrong turn and you're totally lost.
Exactly. Cairns Smith actually did the math and calculated the probability of making an RNA base just by chance. It's tiny, like 1 in 10 to the power of 109. To give you an idea, you're more likely to win the lottery multiple times in a row.
Wow. 1 in 10 to the power of 109. And that's just for one little RNA base. Imagine trying to put together a whole self-replicating RNA molecule with hundreds of those bases in exactly the right order.
It makes you wonder if just relying on chance and regular chemistry is enough to explain how self-replication first happened.
So if those odds are that bad, what other explanations are there? Could there be something else at play that helped this incredible process get started?
Well, that's where some scientists have started to look at something seriously mind-blowing, the role of quantum mechanics in the origin of life.
Quantum mechanics. Okay, now we're getting into some really deep stuff.
Yeah, it might seem like a big leap, but remember, quantum mechanics governs how matter behaves at those tiny atomic and subatomic levels, and it's got all these weird and counterintuitive things going on that could have had a massive impact way back in the early stages of life.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Help me understand how quantum mechanics connects to the origin of life.
Think about that first protoenzyme, that precursor to the self-replicating molecule we were talking about. Now picture it not as the static classical molecule, but as a dynamic quantum system. Instead of being stuck in one specific configuration, it could exist in a superposition of multiple configurations all at the same time.
Superposition. That sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It is. It's a fundamental concept in quantum mechanics. Basically, it means a particle can be in multiple states at once. Like, think of a coin spinning in the air. Before it lands, it's both heads and tails at the same time.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get superposition. But how does that apply to our protoenzyme and the whole self-replication problem?
Well, if our protoenzyme could exist in multiple configurations simultaneously, it could explore a huge number of possibilities way faster than regular chemical reactions could. It's like having this massive parallel processing system checking out all those potential configurations at the same time.
So instead of just bouncing around randomly hoping to stumble on the right arrangement, this protoenzyme could try out a ton of possibilities almost instantly thanks to quantum mechanics.
Exactly. And what if one of those configurations just happened to have the right stuff to be a self-replicator?
Yeah.
The ability to make copies of itself. Boom, you've got the spark of life.
It's like winning the lottery, but instead of buying one ticket, you get to play every single number combination at once.
That's a great way to put it. But hold on, there's another piece to this quantum puzzle. The idea of quantum tunneling.
Okay, quantum tunneling. I've heard of that, but I need a quick refresher.
Imagine you're trying to roll a ball over a hill. In classical physics, that ball needs enough energy to get to the top. But in quantum mechanics, sometimes that ball can tunnel right through the hill, even if it doesn't have enough energy to go over. It's like taking a shortcut through a mountain instead of going over the top.
So our protoenzyme, instead of having to slowly climb over energy barriers to check out different configurations, could tunnel right through them, making the search for that self-replicating structure way faster.
You got it. Quantum tunneling could have made finding that first self-replicator happen much, much quicker.
This is all pretty mind-bending, but wait a minute. Quantum effects usually happen at the atomic level, right?
Yeah.
How could they possibly influence something as complex and macroscopic as the origin of life?
That's a great question. And it points to one of the biggest challenges in this whole field, figuring out how quantum coherence, that delicate dance of quantum states, can be maintained in the messy, warm, wet environment of a living cell.
Right, because I remember from some of our other deep dives that quantum coherence is incredibly fragile.
Yeah.
It gets disrupted really easily by interactions with the environment. It's called decoherence, right?
Right. Decoherence is basically the enemy of quantum coherence. It's like that spinning coin finally landing and becoming either heads or tails. That superposition collapses. But even with that challenge, it seems like nature has found ways to harness and protect quantum coherence.
Like we've seen in photosynthesis, where quantum coherence helps plants use sunlight more efficiently, and in avian magnetoreception, where birds might use quantum effects to sense the Earth's magnetic field to navigate.
Exactly. And those discoveries are making scientists rethink the old idea that quantum mechanics isn't important in biology. It looks like life has found ways to actually use the weirdness of the quantum world to its advantage.
So if life can use and maintain quantum coherence today, it's not such a crazy idea to think it could have done the same thing billions of years ago at the very beginning of life.
Exactly. Now let's switch gears for a minute. Remember that RNA world hypothesis we talked about earlier? Well, some scientists think there might be clues hidden right within the genetic code itself, hints that point to a quantum origin.
Wait, clues in the genetic code? You mean the language of DNA? Are you saying there could be quantum signatures embedded in our very own DNA?
It's a fascinating possibility. Let me tell you about the work of Apurva Patel. He's a physicist who studies quantum algorithms. He's proposed this idea that the genetic code might actually have fingerprints of its quantum beginnings.
Okay, I'm really hooked now. Tell me more about Patel's work. What exactly is he proposing?
He's saying that the genetic code, the set of rules that tell us how DNA sequences are translated into proteins, might actually have a kind of error correction built in, similar to what's used in quantum computing.
Error correction. Why would the genetic code need that?
Think about it. DNA replication isn't perfect. Mistakes happen, mutations pop up. But the genetic code seems to have this built-in redundancy. Certain amino acids are coded for by multiple different codons, those triplets of DNA bases. And often these codons differ by just one base, but they still make the same amino acid.
So even if there's a small error during replication, the genetic code can sometimes still produce the right amino acid, like it's got a backup system.
You got it. And this redundancy, this error correction, is really similar to what's used in quantum computing.
Quantum computing. Okay,
Yeah.
tie this back to the origin of life for me.
In quantum computers, information is stored in these fragile quantum states that are really prone to errors. To protect that information, you use quantum error correction codes. And what Patel noticed is that the genetic code seems to have a similar kind of error correcting ability.
So he's saying that this error correction in the genetic code might be a leftover, a trace from a time when life might have used quantum mechanics to store and process genetic information.
That's the gist of it. It's a bold idea, and it's still pretty speculative, but it opens up a whole new way of looking at the origin of life.
It really does. If Patel's right, it means that quantum mechanics might have been way more involved in the early evolution of life than we ever thought. But let's be real here. This is just one piece of the puzzle. Is there any other evidence that supports this quantum origin of life idea? Okay, so we've got this idea that quantum mechanics could have been a big player in the origin of life, but it's still super theoretical, right? What kind of evidence could we even look for to back this up?
You're right, it's a tough one. We're talking about stuff that happened billions of years ago, so direct evidence is hard to come by. But we can still search for clues. One promising path is to study those quantum phenomena that we actually see in biology today.
You mean things like quantum coherence and photosynthesis and how birds use it for navigation? Could studying those processes help us understand if quantum mechanics was involved in the origin of life?
Exactly. By looking at how life uses and protects quantum coherence, now we might get insights into the mechanisms that could have been happening billions of years ago. It's like working backwards from the present to the past.
So we're trying to connect the dots, figure out how these quantum processes evolved and whether they point back to a quantum start for life itself.
Precisely. And this kind of research needs a team effort. Physicists, chemists, biologists, everyone. It's a super exciting frontier of science.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
But let's circle back to the origin of life. Even if we say, okay, maybe quantum mechanics was involved, there's still that massive hurdle of self-replication. It still seems incredibly unlikely, even with quantum mechanics giving it a boost.
You're right, self-replication is the key. But remember that idea, the protoenzyme, checking out all those different configurations through quantum tunneling? If we think of self-replication as a search problem, trying to find that one special arrangement of molecules that can make copies of itself, then quantum mechanics could have been like the ultimate search engine.
So instead of just random chance and slow, regular chemical reactions, quantum mechanics could have made finding that first self-replicating molecule happen way faster.
That's the idea. It's like having a quantum computer on the job exploring a ton of solutions at the same time.
It's wild to think that something as basic as the origin of life could be connected to these super strange and counterintuitive laws of quantum mechanics.
It is, isn't it? It really makes you rethink how life got started and what's even possible in the universe.
I think this has been one of the most mind-blowing conversations I've ever had. We've gone from Greenland's ancient rocks to the RNA world to quantum mechanics.
Mm.
And now we're left with this incredible idea that the laws of physics might actually be pushing for life to emerge.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That the universe might be set up for complexity for life itself. We may never have absolute proof that life started with quantum mechanics, but exploring these questions and pushing the limits of what we know is what makes science so awesome.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think we've reached the end of our deep dive here. We've tackled some seriously big questions, and I'm walking away with a sense of awe and wonder at the mysteries of life and the universe.
It's been great exploring this with you, and as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. The search for the origin of life is a testament to our endless curiosity and our drive to understand our place in the cosmos. Who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting for us as we keep exploring the intricate tapestry of life and the universe?